Earlier, I played a soundbite from Congressman Jamaal Bowman, you know, the one that pulls out the fire alarm. And he said the reason people of color are dismayed about the economy is because there hasn't been a real conversation about reparations, Betsy. I mean, all they care about is giving away our money to their voting bloc.
That's right.
That's
go get a job. It was a long time ago. We're sorry if you're still worried about it, but go get a job.
Everybody, go get a job.
Everybody can get a job.
Leave our money alone.
We got a lot of job openings in America.
It takes a lot of effort on right-wing media to really stand out in how horrendous your commentary can be. And I think that Newsmax has actually managed it right there. Their contributor, Betsy McCaughey, and host Lidia Curanaj, laughing out loud at the concept of reparations, saying they're sorry if you're still worried about hundreds of years of slavery and all of the associated evils. That worried, that's the term that you use. Go get a job when people have jobs, and it's our money that would be given away. Us, the white people in the panel's money would be given away to you other US citizens who contribute via taxes, and it's just as much money as anyone else. And the entire thing almost could not be more disgusting as possible. I'm missing layers, some of the nuances. Adrienne, what did you make of that?
It was utterly disgusting. And it also is just a very base understanding of how individuals, primarily members of the Black community in the United States, have been harmed and continually held back. You know, it's just because slavery supposedly ended with that whole 13th Amendment thing doesn't mean it actually ended. And we know that for a fact. And also, the reality is that there have been programs and initiatives put in place to continue to hold back Black people and elevate white people, as we saw throughout the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, even just looking at things like redlining and being able to get a mortgage to buy a house. How many of these things were explicitly excluded in terms of options for Black people by way of the US government? And I will always say, the reality is that Black people built the United States and also built their wealth so that they could become the economic world power that they are. So we wouldn't have any of what we have, but for the rape and pillaging of enslaved people whose legacy is still felt today in the harm that is perpetrated on Black Americans. So this isn't about, just go out and get a job. This is about righting a wrong, or at least attempting to.
Yeah, and as you described, righting many wrongs that have existed in many different forms, some of them many years ago, some of them not that many years ago, some of them still present, some of them perhaps coming down the pike if Republicans get their way, because none of this is ancient history. I apologize to the Newsmax hosts if Adrienne and I still seem worried about all of this. And just a stupid, pointless hypothetical question, but if any of this had been done to white conservatives, do you think that the Newsmax hosts would just move on and get a job? Do you think that they wouldn't have an issue with it? Anyway, there was a reference in what they said to Representative Jamaal Bowman. So why don't we actually hear what the congressman had said?
People of color have been turned off for a while because of lack of comprehensive immigration reform, if you're talking about the Latino community, and no conversation at all about reparations if you're talking about the Black community. But we're spending hundreds of billions of dollars every year on weapons and war, but we can't even have a conversation about reparations?
So he did talk about reparations. He admittedly also talked about a number of other issues, both policy and also funding priorities and all that. Like, you could have a big, long conversation about the points that the representative raised there. Or instead, you can just laugh at him and say that he's trying to rob the good white people who pay taxes to pay off his base. I guess that is simpler. It requires less production, Adrienne.
Yeah, and really less true thought. It's really sad that so many people want to act like things didn't happen and that they're not still happening, or that the impact isn't still felt. Like when you had property stolen from people, what that would mean for them if they had that returned to them, which we saw in Southern California recently. We've had this go on for centuries. And so unless it's rectified or addressed, it's not going to be ameliorated. And also there's going to continue to be a divide. I also want to bring up the fact is that marginalized groups in the United States have received considerable amounts of reparations over the years and also globally for harms committed against them and atrocities that were committed. So to act like that this is some wild ideology is just completely and totally inaccurate. It just seems to be inaccurate when it comes to Black people.
Yeah, 100%. By the way, we were talking about how this is an ancient history, like they're active in this area. Well, in the area that Newsmax was just talking about right there, Florida state senator is trying to pass a constitutional amendment to block reparations. So it's a joint resolution to prohibit the state, a county, a municipality, or any other political subdivision from paying reparations to certain individuals, which I understand that's like legal language, certain individuals, but it seems like just a racist not wanting to admit who they're targeting with their constitutional amendment is what it feels like to me. It also says that no government would be allowed to pay compensation in the form of reparations to an individual who's a descendant of an enslaved individual who lived in the US before 1865. So yeah, that is what the Constitution is lacking, is an explicit bar from any future iteration of our country, perhaps more evolved, more enlightened, trying to rectify longstanding historic and current issues. So it's just amazing. Like when I think about like what I would do hypothetically if I got involved in politics, what I would spend my day doing, and then I look at what actual politicians do, it is madness to me. Like that they live their whole life getting some support and raising money to get in office to make sure that nobody gets helped. So, and by the way, like it's not like every Democrat agrees on reparations. Like I want to show you the polls. 58% support reparations in some form. I mean, it all comes down to what it actually is, but that's a general level of support. 18% of Republicans, and there's a massive racial gap as well, with 74% of Black Americans supporting it, only 26% of white Americans. So look, that said, you have to wonder with polls like this, when what most people hear about when they hear about the possibility, even briefly, of reparations, what they hear is perspectives like the Newsmax people, those really angry women, these white women who don't want it to even be casually discussed by a congressman. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Any final thoughts, Adrienne?
So when I was in Israel, pretty much left-wing members of their government had invited me to come and share dialogue about the segregation issues that are going on over there, just within the international boundaries of Israel. One thing that they had noted was that there became a significant divide before there was the essentially pushing out of the Palestinians. And that divide came in part because Germany gave reparations to the Jews as a result of the Holocaust. And that created a situation where the Jews and the Palestinians in Israel were now living in they were living side by side, but then all of a sudden, when somebody gets the come up, then they can start businesses. They can have a lot of more economic mobility, and it creates a greater divide. And so I think that's what a lot of white people are afraid of in the United States. The thought that if we actually had to compensate Black people for the value of their work, then there's going to come now a situation where Black people are going to have more economic mobility, that they're going to be able to buy homes and to have access to greater resources. And unfortunately, because so much of whiteness is geared toward the suppression of the Black identity, they just can't have it.
Yeah. Comparative jealousy and all that is such a big part of it. Like you're talking about how it would help those families. It would also help communities. It would stimulate economic activity. It would create new inventions. It would employ people. Like there would be ripple effects that affect lots of people who are not getting the reparations themselves, but not one single white conservative would stop for a second to think about that. They would just think about the fact that how dare those people get money, my money that I paid in. That's the way that it's set up.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.